This inauguration day has been very busy already. President Biden this morning announcing pardons for several people whom the incoming president had singled out as targets of his revenge, and for whom his Republican allies on Capitol Hill have expressed an appetite for punitive prosecution. President Biden's pardons will be extended to General Mark Milley, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dr. Anthony Fauci, one of the country's and the world's giants in public health and infectious disease, all the members of Congress who served on the congressional investigation into the January 6th attack, importantly, all the staff who served on that select committee investigation, and lastly and importantly, all of the U.S. Capitol Police officers and D.C. Metropolitan Police officers who testified before that select committee. In case you needed a more bracing reminder of what this new administration intends to do to the country, consider that police officers who were beaten within an inch of their lives by this incoming president's supporters, police officers who testified to Congress about that, now need a pardon to protect them from the threat of malicious prosecution by the government headed by the man who sent the people who beat them in the first place. Good morning, America. How are you? The pardons from President Biden this morning come after he spent his last full day in office in South Carolina, attending services yesterday at the Royal Missionary Baptist Church, a historically black congregation in Charleston. He also gave remarks at the International African American Museum. Donald Trump is, of course, being inaugurated on today's federal holiday, honoring the Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr. And yes, that is a coincidence. President-elect Trump and his wife Melania are now at the White House for the traditional pre-inauguration tea with the President and First Lady, Joe and Jill Biden. They are all scheduled to depart fairly shortly for the Capitol, where the inauguration will take place. You may recall that Donald Trump participated in none of these events with Joe Biden 4 years ago, when it was Biden coming in as the new president to succeed Trump. That was the first time since the 1860s that the sitting American president didn't attend the inauguration of his successor. Despite Trump blowing off 150 years of precedent to skip his successor's inauguration 4 years ago, he did not break that tradition forever. President Biden and all three other living former presidents will be in attendance today when Trump is sworn in as the 47th president of the United States. In terms of how we're expecting this morning to go, it'll be shortly after 11:30 Eastern time when Vice President-elect J.D. Vance is sworn in. He'll be sworn in by Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, for whom Vance's wife Usha was once a clerk. Then Donald Trump will be sworn in by Chief Justice John Roberts. This is the first inauguration that is also slated to be attended by foreign leaders. You just saw some of them there in that cutaway shot that we just saw. Argentina's far-right firebrand president, Javier Milei, Italy's right-wing prime minister, Giorgia Meloni, both accepted invitations to attend. Several other right-wing leaders and politicians were invited today. Brazil's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, says he was invited today, but his passport has been revoked over his attempts to overthrow his election defeat in his country. So, alas, Bolsonaro will not be able to make the trip. So it's very unusual that we're going to see these right-wing political party leaders and government leaders from around the country. That's the sort of thing that happens at coronations of foreign monarchs. It doesn't happen at U.S. presidential inaugurations, but we will see that today for Donald Trump. We'll also see today if there's room in the Capitol Rotunda for Trump's special billionaires section, a gaggle of tech CEOs, including Trump's biggest donor, the biggest American political donor of all history, Elon Musk, assuming he can be detached from Trump's side long enough to sit with anybody else. That's not counting the dozen or so other billionaires who Trump has named for various roles in his administration and who may be in attendance today. Trump is expected to have the wealthiest cabinet in U.S. history. We see dignitaries and some cabinet nominees arriving there. Trump is expected to begin his inaugural address shortly before noon. At noon on the dot, according to the U.S. Constitution, Trump will officially become president. Trump will be only the second president in American history to be sworn in for a non-consecutive second term. Who was the other? We can all say it now. Grover Cleveland, 1893. That second term in office for Grover Cleveland, starting in 1893, it did not produce much except an economic depression. But it does mean that when they released dollar coins of all the presidents in 2012, Grover Cleveland got to be on two of them because it was separate presidencies. At the age of 78, Donald Trump will be the oldest person to ever take the oath of office as president of the United States. He will also be the only convicted felon to ever hold the office. This will also be the first inauguration in 40 years that will be held indoors. Trump said he decided to move events inside because of the cold. This has happened once before for Ronald Reagan's second-term inauguration in 1985. They also moved the swearing-in inside the Capitol Rotunda. That day in 1985, it was 7 degrees with a wind chill of -25. Today is cold, but it's nowhere near that cold in Washington. It's expected to be in the low 20s by midday today. That's what people in Greenland might call bikini weather. It's enough to move the inauguration into the Rotunda today. The Capitol Rotunda only fits about 800 people. That's awkward because over 200,000 people have tickets of one kind or another to the inauguration. See Republican former Senate leader Mitch McConnell there and his wife, Trump's transportation secretary in his first term, Elaine Chao there. Elaine Chao famously quitting as transportation secretary in protest of the events of January 6th. Trump says, with things being moved inside to the Rotunda today, that attendees, his supporters who've come in from all over the country, they can watch remotely at the Capital One Arena in downtown Washington, where he held a rally last night. That said, that arena only holds 20,000 people, so there's not much room for most of the people who came to see him from all over. The inaugural parade will also apparently be held inside that arena this afternoon instead of the usual march down Pennsylvania Avenue. We don't exactly know what that's going to look like, but we shall see. Later today, we may see the Republican-controlled Senate confirm at least one of Trump's nominees. There's a possibility that Marco Rubio will be confirmed today as Secretary of State. Incoming President Trump has said he will sign dozens of executive orders and executive actions about energy and the border and discriminating against transgendered people and making it easier to fire federal workers and stopping the ban on TikTok, even though that ban is actually law and executive orders can't supersede the law. Former House Speaker John Boehner, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, his wife Ambassador Callista Gingrich, Trump's aides have also said that Trump will sign some sort of executive action or order today to stop birthright citizenship. Now, birthright citizenship is the core American precept that says if you're born here, if you're born on American soil, you're a U.S. citizen. That is a provision that is explicitly in the Constitution in the plain language of the 14th Amendment. But Trump today will reportedly try to abolish it with an executive order, even though executive orders can't override the Constitution, just as executive orders cannot override the law. But if you needed a theme, that is how we are expecting the second presidential administration of Donald J. Trump to get underway today.